Hello guys, this is Paul McWhorter from TopTechBoy.com, and we're here today with lesson number 16 in our incredible tutorial series where you're going to learn Python or you're going to die trying. I'm going to need you to pour yourself a nice strong cup of coffee. That is straight up black coffee, no sugar, no sweeteners, none needed. You guys watching this channel, you got to remember your jet fighter aircraft. This is your jet fuel. You're not going to get off the ground if you don't have your jet fuel. So go pour yourself a nice big cup of coffee and get ready to learn some cool new stuff. I'm also going to need you to go ahead and fire up your most excellent Visual Studio Code. And as you're doing that, as always, I want to give a shout out to you guys who are helping me out over at Patreon. It is your encouragement and your support that keeps this great content coming. You guys that are not helping out yet, look in the description. There is a link over to my Patreon account. Think about hopping on over there and hooking a brother up. But enough of this shameless self-promotion. Let's jump in and let's talk about what we are going to learn today. And what we're going to learn is we're going to learn about something called Python functions. Okay, you've already been using functions probably without even realizing it. Things like print and input are built-in functions. But what we're going to learn today is we're going to learn about writing your own function. And the purpose of writing a function is when you start getting more complicated code, it can become just burdensome and unwieldy. When the program gets so long, you lose track of what's what and what your variables are and what the different parts of the program are doing. So the purpose of function is to break a program up into little chunks of code that do some logically sensible or some logically consistent type of function. So instead of having one huge piece of code, you break that into smaller chunks and then you call those smaller chunks of code. And there's some just really, really great advantages to that. And so we're going to jump in and we're going to learn the ins and the outs of Python functions. And so I am here in Visual Studio Code. We need to come over here in our most excellent Python files, and I am going to create a new folder. And this new folder, new file, we are going to call this Python functions.py. The .py is kind of important, and boom, we've got a fresh new Python program just waiting to be written. Okay, so let's say we wanted to input two numbers and then sum the numbers together. Well, what I could do is I could say A is equal to, let's make it a float, and then we're going to input, and then we're going to say, please, I'm going to get this out of your way. Please input your first number. Put a space, and then we close the quote, close the input, and close the int. And then B is equal to float input. Yep. And then please input your second number, like that. All right. And now what we could say is C is equal to A plus B, and then A plus B, and then we could say print C, like that. And then this shouldn't be any big surprise. This should work. And then we could say, all right, down here, I'm going to take 3. Second number is 2. And then it prints 5, which is the sum. Okay, that kind of makes sense. This would be the normal way of doing things. But what we want to do is, let's say that you might add, you might subtract, you might multiply, you might divide, and then the program gets longer and longer and longer and more complicated. Well, what we want to do is we want to build a function to start doing this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you the first thing that we're going to define our first function. Very important. Your functions have to be at the top of the code. Now, that's not true in all programming languages. And I find it kind of confusing to have the functions at the top of the code because I want to jump in and I want to see the code and the functions down below. But in Python, you have to put your functions at the top of the code. So up here at the top, I'm going to define a function. And to define a function, you use the keywords def, define. Boom, you see it turns that happy little color. So it recognizes that. It knows I'm going to create a function. Now I need to label or name my function. I think I'll call it tally, because I'm going to be tallying up numbers. And now what I need to do is I need to put in parentheses parameters. And those are parameters or arguments that I'm going to pass to the function. And so like the main program is going to pass these parameters, and then the function is going to grab it. How many parameters can you pass? As many as you need. You could pass no parameters. Let me just show you here. Well, no, I'm not going to do something silly, but what parameters do I need? Well, I'm going to pass A and I'm going to pass B, because those are the two numbers, this A and B down here, to do a tally. Okay, but what you got to see is it's looking at the position. It's not looking at the names of the variables. So even though I'm going to pass A and pass B, I'm going to catch them in X and Y. So these variable names do not have to match the variables that you're passing when you call. So and then let's go ahead and call the function down here so we can talk. What we could do is, I'm not going to call it yet. We'll do that in a minute. So I'm still defining the function. So I have this function called tally. It is going to catch the variable X. It's going to catch the variable Y. And just like an if statement, a while loop, or a for loop, we put a colon there, our friend Mr. Colon, and that's going to define the start of the function. Now we will be in this function as long as we are indented. When we come down here like this, this is not in function, okay? And then as long as we are indented, we are in the function. We are in the function. Okay, as long as we're indented, those lines of code are in the function. But then when we stop indenting, we are not in the function. So what do we want to do? We want to say C, our sum, or let's call it Z, is equal to X plus Y. So we pass it X, we pass it Y, it calculates C. All right, and so here, instead of saying C is equal to A plus B, what we're going to do is C is equal to tally. I'm going to call the function. Now I've got to pass it A and I've got to pass it B. So I'm going to pass it A and B. So what's going to happen here? C is going to call tally, all right, and then it is going to pass A, and tally is going to catch A and X, and then it's going to pass B, and tally is going to catch B in Y. And so now the sum here is Z. All right, now this is the thing. This function knows what Z is, but this main program down here doesn't, so we need to return it. We need to return it. And so what are we going to return? We are going to return Z. Now you can see that C is equal to tally of A plus B. A goes to X, B goes to Y, then Z becomes X plus Y. And so just like we passed it A and X caught it, we passed it Y, or we passed it B and Y caught it. Now what it is going to do is it is going to throw back to you Z, and then you're going to catch Z over here in C, because C is equal to, kind of like you could think of it as what is returned by tally of A and B, and that's what we said is returned here. And so now we would indeed print C, because C is what we caught, but it was calculated as Z and then it was caught in C. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. All right, let's give it a try. Input your first number, 3. Oops, always click down here, so okay, 3. Okay, input your second number, 2. And boom, look at that, 5. Okay, you've written your first function. Have a little jet fuel. Okay, we wrote our first function. Now there's something that is important for you to see. And that is that this is like a little independent chunk of code that is separate from the main program. And it doesn't share anything with the main program except what you pass it and then what you return. But I want you to see something here. I'm going to say A is equal to 23 and B is equal to 45. And so when I go in there, you see I'm making A 23 and B 45. But then I want to come down here, and after I print the tally, I'm going to say print, and then I'm going to say A equal and comma A, and then print B equal comma B, or comma B, like that. Okay, so I'm going to call tally. I'm going to pass it A and B, and then it's going to go into X and Y. And while I'm in there, I'm going to change A and B, and then I'm going to return Z. Now, what do you think A and B are going to be here? Let's see. Okay, first number is 3. First number is 3. Second number is 2. And then boom. Look at this. A is equal to 3. B is equal to 2. And the sum is still 5. So even though you changed A and B up here, it doesn't change it outside the function because these variables have a scope, and their scope is within their little domain. And this A and B live inside of tally, and they're totally independent of any A and B out here. Now let's take this, let's copy this. All right, and let me get rid of that comma there. Okay, let's take this print A, print B, and then let's put it up here. Okay, Control V. Let's say this is A in the function, and this is B in the function, and I better tab this over. I lost my tab when I pasted. All right, so you see here A and B are still 3 and 2 even though you changed them. And then up here we can see I'll put in 3. I'll put in 3, and then I'll put in 2. And then look at that. Inside the function, A and B are 23 and 45, but outside the function, A is 2 and A is 3. A is 3 and B is 2. Okay, must have put them in backwards that time. I'm sorry. So you see, this A and B are their own A and B, so you don't share variables between what's happening in a function and what's not happening in a function. You could look at it as what happens in the function stays in the function, except what you pass in and catch, and then what you pass back out. But then you could have the same set of variables inside as outside. Now this is a great thing, because if I have one function that's using the variable x, and I have another function using the variable x, this function can't mess up this function. What if this function changed x? Well, it's not going to change the x in the other function. So it really has these independent, standalone little chunks of working on their own little pieces of code, and they don't interact with each other except through these ways that you pass variables in and you pass variables out. So that is kind of neat. All right, now what I also want you to see is that you could pass something. Let's do something else. Let's say that I could make an array. And so I'm going to come here. I'm going to get rid of that stuff. Let's just kind of start over here. And I'm going to say that x is going to be equal to 2, 4, 6, I'm using periods 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. All right, and then comma 10. And so I have an array, and then I need to kind of know how many nums I have. And so the number of nums is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so I have 5 numbers in the array 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And then what I could do is I could call tally, and I could say that my sum is equal to tally. I'm going to call tally, and I'm going to pass it nums so it knows how many numbers there are, and then I'm going to pass it x. So you see I can actually pass an array in. So up here I might call it something different like num, number of numbers, num, and then I might call it my array. Okay, so what's it going to do? It's going to pass nums into num, and then it is going to pass the array x into my array. Now, what are we going to do in this program? Well, let's say that we went for I in range. And the range, we're going to start at 0, and then we're going to go through num, and we want to step through that array, and so we need to stop one less than num because we're starting at 0, but the range function does anyway, so it's going to stop one less than num because we're starting at 0. It all works out. I've talked about that ad nauseum in other earlier videos, and then we're going to increment each time through by 1. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say tote is equal to tote plus my array of I. All right. And so what we're going to do is we're going to pass it an array, and then we're going to total up the numbers in that array. And so if we're going to say tote equal tote, it hasn't seen tote yet when it's on the right of that equation. So we need to, before we move in here, set tote equal to 0, just so we can get it started, and then it sums them up. And then what am I going to do? I am going to return tote. And so I'm going to come down here. I'm going to say my sum is the tally of nums. That's how many numbers we have, 5. And then it's going to sum up these 5 numbers that are in X. And so then what we can do is we can print. And then what we can say, array total equals space, and then my sum. My sum. I cannot do this today. S-U-M. Okay, my sum. All right, so let's run this and see what happens. Okay, the array total is 30. Well, 6 and 4 is 10. 8 and 2 is 10, so that's 20 plus 10 is 30. Shazam! We got it. Okay, so do you see what's nice is that you can have these nicely defined functions, and I just say, I see that I have X, and I see I have 5 numbers in X, and then I have this function called tally, and I'm passing it nums and X, and I can kind of see that my sum is going to come back to, my sum is going to end up being those numbers added together. And so, let me show you too the type something else you could do. So let's go back and let's just say A is equal to float. We're going to float, and we're going to input, and then we're going to say enter first number, like that, and then B is equal to, I did not close that, like that. Okay, B is equal to float input, and then enter second number. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to call, I'm not going to finish this yet. Okay, I got to come back and put something there later, but I don't care about this 5 anymore because I got rid of that array. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass it A and B. All right, I'm going to pass it A and B. And then what I'm going to do up here is I'm going to grab it again in X, and I am going to grab it in Y. All right, now what I can do is I can say that tote is equal to X plus Y, and I can say diff is equal to X minus Y, and then I can say the product is equal to x times y, and then I can say the division is equal to x divided by y. And now you can only have one return statement. So what am I going to return? Class? What am I going to return? I'm going to return tot, diff, prod, division. Okay. Now, what do I better do here? Like, what if I said XA is equal to, I'm returning 4 values and I only have one variable here. So I better say, let's say W, X, X, Y, Z, Z. Now, what's W going to be? W is going to be their sum. X is going to be their difference. Y is going to be their product. And Z is going to be their division. And so what I could do here then say, I could say here, the sum is, and that would be A. And then let's kind of get fast here and do a Control C. And then I'm going to Control V, Control V, Control V. So the sum is A. The difference is B. The product is C. And then the division is D. Oh no. No. Did you guys catch that? I returned it as WXYZ, so these need to be WXYZ. Just so you know, it doesn't count as a mistake if you catch it before you run it. Keep that in mind. It's not a mistake if you catch it before you run it. Well, let's have a little jet fuel here. Okay, and let's run this thing. We're going to come over here and enter the first number is 3. And 3, 2. Okay, the sum is 5, the difference is 1, the product is 6, and division is 1.5. Look at that. All right, so this is getting to be pretty cool here. This is definitely getting to be pretty cool, I think. So that is all working. I hope you guys can see that down there okay. Let's see. I wonder if that makes it a little better. Try to keep it where you can, try to keep it in a size that you guys can see it, but sometimes your screens are a little bit small. All right, so that really worked well. Okay, I also want to show you that you could you could just pass it, let's say, how could I do this? Well, I'm just going to come up here and I'm not going to take any parameters in, okay? I'll just take nums, how many numbers you have, okay? And then nums like that, or I'll just say number, I'll call it num for number of numbers, and enter how many numbers. Okay, enter how many numbers. Okay, and then I'm going to get rid of all this stuff. Okay, so if I want to input 4 numbers, what I could come up here is, I'm going to catch it in nums, and I've input it here. So then what I'm going to say is for I in range, we're going to start at 0. We're going to start at 0. We're going to go to nums. Right? It'll stop 1 before nums, but that's right. Since we're starting at 0, we wouldn't want to go all the way to nums. We're going to increment in steps of 1. And then our friend Mr. Colon's going to go there. And then if we're going to make an array, then I better create an empty array. So I'm just going to say X is an empty array here. And then I'm going to come down here, and inside that for loop, I'm going to say X, I'm going to say num, I'm going to say my num is equal to float of input, I hate it when it covers things up like that. I think that's why I made it smaller last time, was that nonsense. Let's see. Okay, float of input, and then I have got to make it smaller or you guys are not going to be able to ever see this. Okay, float of input, and then enter your number. All right. And then that finishes out like that. And so now I have the number. Now what do I want to do? I want to put it in the array. So I'm going to do what to X? I'm going to append. And then what am I going to append? My num, like that. And so when I'm done here, I should have an array of numbers that I input. Well, what can I do with that? Now I can return. And what can I return? I can return X. And then down here, what I could say is I could call that function and I could say Y is equal to tally. And then what do I want to pass to it? How many nums? Num. So that's the number of numbers that we're going to put in that array. And then we're going to print Y. All right. Does that make sense? So I go to tally and I say, get me 5 numbers. It creates the X array that has 5 numbers in it. It passes that X array back. That X array is caught in Y, and then Y you can print out. And so let's go here. We are going to run this baby, and then we're going to say how many numbers? 5. I should have put a space there. I'm going to kill this. I'm getting in bad habits of not putting spaces there. Okay. All right, so here we go. And how many numbers do you have? I have 5. And then I'm going to float object cannot be interpreted as an integer. Oh, I know what I did. I passed float as I entered the number of numbers as a float. Well, you're not going to have 5.5 numbers. You're going to have round numbers there. And so this should have been an int. And the integers are the the round numbers, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, -1, -2. They're those round numbers like that. Because you cannot have an index. You cannot do this range with a float. This has to be an integer. And because I'd made num a float, it passed num to nums, and then nums became a float, and then range didn't like having a float in there. So that is what happened. And let's give it another shot here. So we're coming in. How many numbers do you have? I am getting really, really bad at that. Okay. I think I'll try to make it bigger now so you can see it. Okay, we'll do it this, so when I'm down here, I'll make it bigger. All right, so that'll be 5, and then enter your number. Okay, I want the number 5, I want the number 4, I want the number 3, I want the number 2, I want the number 1, and the array that it prints, right? Remember this print down here? The array that it prints is 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Boom, we got it. Okay, so this thing, so do you see how we can pass, you know, I could also pass an array in here and I could return an array. Okay, I could pass an array in, I could return an array. There's a lot of different things that I can do. But what the important thing that you guys have got to understand here is that the variables in the main program are not shared with the variables here. So you can use the same variables, but it's like they're completely different. This is like its own little world. This function is its own little world. You can also have other functions, like I could have def and I could have reverse, okay, and then I could pass it an X, and this could like take an array and it could reverse order it, and then I could even have this array I could have this function input the array, and then this function could call this function, and this function could like sort it and put it in right order, return it to this, and then it would return it to that. So functions it's like you can nest them. A function can call a function, can call a function, can call a function. And then this function would return to this one. And this one, what it returns goes to this one. And what this one returns come back here. So you sort of drill down into the stack and then you climb yourself back out of the stack. So you can have just indefinite amount of nesting. And that is okay, but just make sure that each little chunk or each function is logically consistent. Make sure that it is logically consistent. Okay, this is your homework. Do you remember that program where we input a set of grades? You said, like, how many grades do you have? And you say 5, and it's like 90, 91, 92, 93, 94. Okay, so you have those grades. And then what you do is we did several things. We printed the grades out that we had input, and then we averaged the grades, and then we print the average, and then we found the high grade, and then we found the low grade. All right. And so when you looked at that code, that was like a really, really long thing of code. So this is what I want you to do. I want you to go in and write functions. So you're going to write a bunch of functions up here, but logically separate those functions logically. So don't just say define the whole enchilada and then do in just one function all those things that I just said. That wouldn't make any sense. And then you came down here and you called the whole enchilada. That doesn't make very much sense. But you might have something like input grades. You might have define. You might have print grades. Okay. And of course, you got to fill these things in. You might then have average grades. Okay, and then you might have high, low, which would find the high and the low. All right. Then what does your program look like? Your program looks like input grades, print grades, average grades, and then high, low. Of course, you got to have something equal to something, and you got to do a few things down here. But all of a sudden now, if you made functions, when I look at input grades, it's like, oh, that makes sense. What that's doing is it's inputting the grades. Average grades, that makes sense. What that's doing is averaging the grades. Then if I look at the overall program, I'm doing function calls, and then what the program itself is doing is crystal clear. Oh, look, what is this guy doing? I'm looking at his code. Looks like he's inputting grades. Looks like he's going to print the grades. It looks like he's going to average the grades, and it looks like he's going to find high and low. So all of a sudden, your code becomes very readable, and it's very much easier to debug these things. And then also you can reuse the code. If you ever need to average grades in the future, you can come in and you can grab this function that you've already done. Or maybe you'll make a really cool sort function where you sort the order of the grades, and then you can just call your sort function. So you start building up your own little library of useful tools. Now understand, in this assignment, I didn't ask you to do the sort again. That sort was kind of a hard problem. So what you're going to do for this one is you're going to input the grades, you're going to print the grades, you're going to average the grades, of course print your average, and then you're going to do the high-low. I usually don't print inside of a function. I'll go out and I'll find the average, and then in the main program I'll say your average is. So I don't usually do printing inside of the functions, unless of course it's a function called print grades, if that makes sense. Hey guys, this has been a lot of fun. I hope you guys are having as much fun taking these lessons as I'm having making them. I just love Python. I love coding in Python. If you like this, give me a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, hit the subscribe button. When you do, be sure to ring that bell so you'll get notifications when my future lessons come out. And then think about sharing this with your friends on social media and so forth, so that we get more people learning how to do useful things instead of sitting around watching silly cat videos. Okay guys, this has been Paul McWhorter from TopTechBoy.com. I will talk to you guys later.